thumbs up. Okay, got a thumbs up. We have people on Zoom, and we're glad for them to be joining us. Tonight we're going, when I think of cities in South Dakota, I think of like our oldest city like Yankton, but tonight we're going to learn about one of our newest cities, which is Pickstown, and the building of that and how the dam that was built near it on the Missouri River helped change the face of South Dakota. We have two guest speakers tonight, Bill Lampman and Ken Stewart. And I'm going to introduce each of them now. Bill will be speaking first, followed by Ken, and then we'll open it up for people to ask questions of them. Well, Bill, he grew up in Nebraska, and he grew up in Spencer, Nebraska, and he went into the U.S. Army. He spent 18 months in Vietnam, and when he returned, it was to Fort Carson, Colorado, discharged from the Army, and then he spent 30 years working for the U.S. Postal Service. He's a fairly new resident of Pickstown, as he and his wife, Rosemary, who's also with us tonight, moved there in 2002. And he's the vice president of the board of directors of the Pickstown and Fort Randall Dam. So our other speaker, Ken Stewart, is probably familiar to many of us. Ken was retired last summer after 35 plus years of working for the state of South Dakota, and much of that time was spent here at the Cultural Heritage Center, where he was the research room administrator in the state archives. And Ken was a dam worker's kid. His father worked on all 4 Missouri River mainstem dams. And he was born in Wagner when his father was working on building the Fort Randall Dam. And he was a frequent visitor to Pickstown and will share his memories of what the town was like when he visited as a youngster. And as I said, at the end of this, when Ken gets done speaking, there will be opportunities for people to comment. I know we have some people who lived in Pickstown when they were growing up, as well as the author of tonight's book club selection, which is The Building of Pickstown and Fort Randall Dam. And tonight's program is sponsored by the South Dakota Historical Society Foundation, which is the fundraising partner of the State Historical Society. And I'm Dorinda Daniel, and I work for the foundation, and I'm glad to have you all here tonight for such an interesting program. And with that, I welcome Bill.
Well, thanks for everybody coming. Surprised to see such a crowd. I was told maybe 7 people would be there. Thank you. Just a little pre-Pickstown and Fort Randall Dam. We want to look at the great Sioux Nation that was here before us and other native tribes. Back in 1794, the fur travelers from St. Louis, trappers from St. Louis, traveled the Missouri River trapping. They were from all over the United States and Canada. They had a Pawnee house, which was the first established building, as far as we can tell, in South Dakota Territory, 1794. So we really got a lot of history to begin with. Then Lewis and Clark, 1803 to 1806, traveled down the Missouri River from BC all the way up to the West Coast and traveled through our area and did a lot of documentation of vegetation, animals, and everything that they endured in that trip. It was, everybody hear me okay? Yeah, in 1856, after the massacre down in Nebraska, General Harney wanted to establish a new fort on the Missouri River. At that time, Fort Pierre was becoming, had been for quite a few years, and it was extremely cold in the wintertime, so they established this fort on the Missouri River down at, right across the Nebraska border. And this fort was very prominent. It operated for 36 years, 1856 to 1892. 2,000 troops were stationed there. It was really an established protection for natives, against the natives, and to keep peace, as well as not only for people coming in to settle and develop homesteads in the area. A lot of travelers came through on their way to better ideas, gold rush in California and Colorado. So many people travel our area. We have records of people came from all over the world and came to settle, joined the military and settled in Fort Randall. Then World War II, 1944, Pick-Sloan, on the Missouri River, they had a lot of problems with flooding and the need for power to create electricity. Fort Randall was the first dam to be built on the Missouri River. In 1946, the Corps of Engineers came into our area looking for places to put workers. Lake Andes, the surrounding towns, didn't want construction workers into their area. They just thought that they'd bring a lot of crime, a lot of trouble, alcohol, whatever. And they said, no, we don't want you here. So what did the Corps of Engineers do? They built a town, a complete town from prairie and riverbank to a town to accommodate up to 5,000 people. Probably the highest number that ever came to live in Pickstown was about 3,100 in 1952. But the town was built in 4 stages. The first stage was infrastructure. At that time, there was no railroad into Pickstown. There was no highway into Pickstown. Corps of Engineers built a highway. First built the railroad from Lake Andes into Pickstown. And from that train activity, 38,450 carloads brought equipment, people into Pickstown to work on the dam. So it went from nothing to a really busy place. In stage 2, they continued on road and railroad development. The fire police station. We have everything in this town that a lot of towns didn't have. There was nothing there, so everything had to be built. The utilities all had to be brought in. The roads, the streets, they started out with housing to bring the workers in. They built, then the police and fire station. We have a police and fire station now. I just was fortunate to get it on a National Historic Record. So that is one of the few remaining buildings left in Pickstown, from a town of 4,000 with everything to very limited. In May of 1947, stage 2 was brought in. March of 1948, they started with stage 3. more housing, a hospital that had 30 beds, a doctor. The doctor there had his course of being there from 48 to 50, had 400 babies born, 700 operations. So it was a busy, big hospital for the area. Then the school was built. And you'll see on the pictures there, the first top left-hand picture shows the school kind of on the bottom right-hand side, but it was a huge school. At that time, the state listed it as the most modern, fully equipped school in South Dakota. So everything, like I said, was modern, built to the time, and it was all the accommodations that everybody could never had before. Stage 3, well, then they went on to the shopping center. They had everything there from grocery to banks to post office, all the facilities to accommodate the town. So people had everything right there in Pickstown. Stage 3 went into more housing. Stage 4, I'll go on to more housing. We had a 130-room hotel, the Pick Hotel. Whoa. I will go more into how Pickstown became called Pickstown, and more into the history of that later on. The church, we have a chapel. The chapel is very unique. It was built to accommodate 3 different religions: Catholic, Protestant, and Jewish. So it had a revolving altar that turned to the different denominations. And they started, I think, at 7 o'clock in the morning, and up right from the beginning, or probably the busiest period of the building the dam, they probably had up to 400 people attending the church on a Sunday. So it was quite a public garage. And in the final town building, which would have been 1949, Pickstown had 13 dormitories, 262 1, 2, 3 bedroom complexes, 125 cabins, 25 utility areas for 225 trailer spaces, 25 permanent houses, which still are there today, 3 cafeterias, the large school, movie theater, 610 seat theater, recreational center, 8 lanes of bowling, probably the largest in South Dakota at that time. The hospital, the hotel, and the shopping center had the barber shop, beauty shops, there's even a car dealership there. I think it was Ford. I think it was Ford. But anyway, the administration building was enormous, all glass. The front, the shopping center, the west and the south was solid glass. So they were built by the Corps of Engineers, which built very solid. We have more concrete in Pickstown than I think there is in the dam. I don't know. That might be a conflict. But anyway, people are trying to build homes there today, and they're finding tanks and everything concrete in order to build the foundation. So it's quite difficult. Building the dam started in 1946. I'll go back to the town. The town was listed at about 10 million to build, which, with all those facilities, was a pretty good purchase. Then building the dam started in 1946, and this brought on construction people from all over the United States to build this dam. 115,830 acres of farmland, timber, and pasture was needed to build this dam in St. Francis case. So we had big ceremonies during that process. On July 30th, 1946, they had a groundbreaking ceremony that 6,000 people attended. So people were very interested. This was probably one of the first projects after World War II in 1946. I don't know just for a fact that it was the first, but one of the first. Then they had a groundbreaking ceremony July 30th. Fort Randall open house, July 26, 1948. 10,000 people were in attendance. They had a caravan that left Yankton of 1,000 vehicles to come to be a part of that ceremony. Then the dam was completed, 1956, 10 years. 10 years to complete the dam. All the construction workers were going on to Fort Pierre, Yankton, Gavin's Point, and Pickstown just joined them. 1954, they were looking at what to do with this town. It had all the facilities, and they weren't being used. Everything was closing up. The hospitals, 6 years, the hospital is in operation. And for these buildings to be built as solid as they were, the theaters, all these buildings were being not kept up. And it's really a shame to see that the town did not continue on to become a major town in South Dakota. We just look at what an opportunity we had. Fortunately, us that live there now are kind of grateful it's not a big town. But for those who could have been there, wish maybe it had been. So we're just on July 26, 1952, going back a few years, the river was closed off. It had been rerouted to the south, completely go around the dam. And in that July 26, 1952, they started running water through the intakes in the powerhouse. December 19th of 1953, travel opened over the Missouri River, Fort Randall Dam, Highway 18 and 281. It was a new access from Nebraska, southern states up into the northern states, South Dakota. So it was very, very beneficial for travel. Yeah, March 15th, 1954, production of the first power came to Fort Randall. Dwight D. Eisenhower spoke at the White House to the governor, Anderson at that time, to start generation of power. The final 8th generation generator started in January 10th of 1956, producing 320,000 kilowatts of electricity. And at that time, they say that was covering 320,000 users. So people were very, very grateful to see that come about. Yeah, in the 1960s, we just continued to lose buildings. Everything was closing up and being torn down. And it's just really sad to see that these buildings were built to last. And here they read no longer. That's why the book's out. Fortunately, the two authors that put this book together is our history. we're keeping our history here. It's in the book. We don't have it in the town, but it's in the book. And it really explains everything that took place in Fort Randall, Pickstown, and it does go into the old Fort Randall. So we just look at how can we get people to know about our area. It's a beautiful, you come into Pickstown over from the east, from the west on 18, beautiful site. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
We're so fortunate to have it.
I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to come back to live, thanks to my wife, Rosemary. Okay, 1970s, we continued to lose. Everything was being taken out of the town. Like I said, to this day, we have three of the major buildings there. The police and fire station, which is on the National Register. The old we call it the Rainbow Room, but it was everything. It had post office and all the different shops, shoe shops, grocery stores, everything. Then we go into the 1980s. March 8th of 1985, Pickstown was for sale. That anybody that wanted to purchase Pickstown. At that point, the Corps of Engineers had exhausted trying to find someone to come in and take over the town of Pickstown. So they put it up for sale. August 16th of 1985, President Reagan signed a bill into law to transfer Pickstown over to local control. We had 61 people living in Pickstown that time that said, we want to make Pickstown a town in South Dakota. So that's what happened. October 2nd, 1985, 61 of the residents voted to make Pickstown a town. 0 voted against it. Everybody was for it. To incorporate, 50% of those were employed by the powerhouse, by the dam. April 10th, 1986, after plotting ownership of buildings and homes, everything was transferred to the town Pickstown. April 5th, 1986, the first board of trustees was sworn in. July 28th, 1986, the South Dakota Governor Janko dated proclamation of the town. August 10th, 1986, dedication of the ceremony for the town. It was attended by the Corps of Engineers. Fort Randall Castle American Legion was very popular and very helpful to the town people. To this day, we were able to keep it. We were striving, keeping membership, but we were able to get new members to keep it afloat. So we still have our American Legion still in Pickstown. Children of Pickstown and the 147th Army Band had a program for the dedication. South Dakota National Guard and the Pickstown Board. So Pickstown became the newest, most modern. Actually, at that time, it may not have been the modern, but 1949, it was listed as the most modern town and the 10th largest town in South Dakota. So we're us people that live there, some of them would like to see growth. We have a lot of the older people that worked there, grew up, families grew up there, cherish Pickstown. And we have a lot of people coming in from all over wanting to retire there. And we had quite a problem of getting people concerned about retaining our history. Everybody seemed to think, well, that's in the past, we're building new, tear down the old, what we had, and build new. But we were able to overcome that, and we now have preserved or kept our 3 buildings. I guess in closing, I'd like to make a few comments on, like I said, this is our history right here. We don't have the buildings there, but we have the book. It explains everything about them buildings and what went through those buildings. It's on sale at the here, or it can be purchased through me at the museum. Everybody knows Tom Brokaw. He spent 8 years in Pickstown, then went on to Yankton with his parents and graduated out of Yankton and became in NBC News. Art Troutman, Guy Rhodes is the president, or the Art Rhodes and Art Troutman and Guy Rhodes. Sorry, guys. I knew I did something up. Anyway, they compiled 1,500 news articles, all the data that they had received. They were responsible for building Pickstown Museum. 2012, they decided we need to make a museum in Pickstown. And all the alumni that came through there, they have continued alumni banquets there. We were supposed to have one last year that we thought maybe Tom Brokaw maybe attend, but he was there in 2017 as well as 2014 to make a dedication of the museum. We have a fabulous museum. I have a picture over there in the binder there that shows our museum. We kind of expanded out from just the Fort Randall Dam and the Pickstown to Lewis and Clark and Old Fort Randall. I now have a model of Old Fort Randall exactly the way it was in 1865. All the buildings, the 16 by 23 foot display of all the buildings and grounds of Fort Randall. We also have the actual grounds down below the dam, as well as the chapel. So we have a lot of things to see there. If you have the time, come in, take the time to come down to see us. Just a few comments about the authors of this book, which I better get in. But Art Troutman compiled all these newspaper articles and turned them over to Guy to put them into print and to publish. They graduated in 1953, Art did in 1953, Guy in 1955. And I have nothing but be thankful for what they did to keep Pickstown history alive. Anyone that would like to purchase this book or come down and see Pickstown, I'm the vice president of the museum down there. And I'd love to see everybody down there. I started opening up prior to me taking on this position 3 years ago. They only opened it by appointment. I've opened it on Saturday from 12:30 to 4. And we don't get a lot of people there, but everybody comes in there and has nothing but thankful praise that we have that museum there. I think I've taken probably, I don't know how many minutes I've been on, probably extended my time. But anyway, Kim will take over from here, and I appreciate your attention. Good listening.
The phone is ringing.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Unmute. 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 No. Speaker, unmute. Speaker, unmute.
There, try it now.
Thank you.
Agree. As far as, I have no knowledge of these kind of things, and I'm not gonna learn. That's it. Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. Bill did such a fine job of speaking. I am almost speechless. Which is like me saying, I have just a few words to say. That's never going to happen. In any event, I want to mention that later this summer, I'm going to start a series of podcasts of South Dakota history. And if I do them, I can say what I want, and I will not be hampered by bureaucrats. So I hope you might join me on some of those. We're going to talk about a lot of things, people, places, general history, nothing academic. Someone, in fact, a well-known historian told me one time, he said, Mr. Stewart, you are a Platte River historian. Your knowledge is a mile wide, but it's only a foot deep. And that's probably true. In any event, my knowledge of Pickstown dates from family connections and so forth, and that's what I'm going to talk about. As I said, Bill didn't steal my thunder, so to speak. I'm glad he mentioned a lot of these things, so I can go on and talk about the community of Pickstown as I know it and the family connection. I want to mention about Pickstown and that area. We have to understand that these Missouri River dams will never be built again, as far as I understand it, because of environmental concerns. A lot of tragedy associated with the construction of the Fort Randall Dam and all of the Missouri River dams when it comes to the destruction of cultural resources, the destruction of way of life for our Dakota people, as well as the white people who live there along the river bottoms, to know that those beautiful stands of timber with vines and shrubs and berries are gone, and the wildlife enjoyed living on the river bottoms. A thing of the past for the most part. Though if you get down below Fort Randall, you can still see the native river, chalk rock cliffs, which are really, really cool. And as you head down towards Sioux City, it's where if you have a boat, there's a little place to take a nice trip. I recommend that one strongly. My father was working after World War II. He came home and went to Marty Mission, South Dakota, where he worked as a plumber in the construction of certain buildings on the campus of the Indian Mission there. And for Father Sylvester was very well known in the history of Marty Mission. In 1950, however, he and several of his friends decided to go for more money and go work at the Fort Randall Dam. His salary was $100 a week, which was a very good living in 1950. That's when the loaf of bread was 11 cents, a can of salmon was 29 cents. You know, things were just, you know, different price and different world. To buy a new Mercury, soon after starting to work at the Rocky Dam. He worked as a carpenter, joiner, and later was involved with union activities, which oddly enough, these construction workers on these dams in South Dakota were union. Now, this is a non-union state, right to work state. But in order for these huge corporations to come in and do work in South Dakota, they were forced to pay union wages whether they wanted to or not. And otherwise, there would have been strikes against other projects in other parts of America. And that's how that was done. The number of contractors who came into South Dakota probably were more than a dozen during the 10 years of dam construction in South Dakota. We had Western Contracting out of Sioux City who brought in these huge dredges and dredged up thousands and thousands and thousands of cubic feet of dirt. I remember my uncle, Ben Hunemichael, was the captain of the big dredges. At his farm, this wouldn't happen today, he had lined up all kinds of buffalo skulls that they pulled up from the bottom of the Missouri River. He must have had 3 dozen of those things. Huge, wonder where they are now. I don't have one. But that was the kind of thing that happened. And Western contractors, as I said, were on all of the 4 dams. From then on, they went to work overseas. Made a lot of money. Everest ran. Bill talked about the housing, the little cottages, and I assume we have some pictures of those over there, Bill. Those
Yes, we
little
do.
white, they were all white with green roofs. They had 2 bedrooms, most of them that I remember. I don't remember what the rent was. I was going to call a couple of cousins. They weren't very warm. Somebody's always calling. Anyway, I'm up. I think I'm old. Anyway, these little cottages, I remember visiting my cousins there in Pickstown in these little cottages, and they were very cold. They were well built, but they were not built for this climate. There were also, and I hope there's a photo of that around here, 100 or 150 of these trailer houses. They're not modular homes. They're 8 by 35 foot trailer houses. I lived in one as a kid. I know what they're like. They made Charles Eisman a multimillionaire as the founder and head of the Eisman Corporation, which before that had been primarily a Sioux tire and battery company. But mobile homes made him extremely wealthy. These mobile homes had to have been a piteous way to live in early 1950s in South Dakota because people weren't used to setting them up properly. They had very little insulation inside. They would line them up, hook the water up, hook the sewer up, then hook the electricity up. Nobody thought about the coming winter when every damn water line froze and probably stayed that way most of the winter. Nobody had ever heard of heat tapes. Maybe they weren't around then. But that's the kind of dismal living they were in the wintertime. And multiplied by 100 plus mobile homes. They followed the dams. Fort Pierre was filled with these trailer houses in the 1950s and mid 60s. So was Pierre. Any place that was vacant, you had a trailer house on it. The same thing to a smaller extent in Yankton and in the Big Bend area. But that was what people had to live in. There wasn't any time or money to build sufficient housing. Of course, that kind of diminished to some extent, thank goodness. The problems that were created by the quote dam workers unquote were certainly prophetically correct. as far as alcohol, there was a lot of alcohol problems associated with these dam workers. Most of them, they worked hard and they played hard, usually spending their entire paycheck, leaving the family, in some cases, in near starvation. There were, thank God, some decent human beings who thought of their family and provided for them the best they possibly could. But there was a lot of boozing going on in those days. We had the bars in Fort Pierre that cash your paycheck so that you could start right in after you were paid. And so I don't hold the Laramie family of the hopscotch and to some extent others mentioned in very high esteem because they didn't do the families any good. Once the dams were finished, most of these people went on to other things, other dams. Some stayed, like my father and some of his friends. My father was able to give up that drinking life and became a decent, responsible citizen and contributed to his life after his early vital years. The name dam worker's kid wasn't held in high esteem in construction towns. I remember as a third grader, I walked home with a young girl who was also in the third grade. Next morning, her mother came out and said, "She can't walk with you to school anymore. You're a dam worker still." Yeah. I didn't know what that meant, why that was not good. And my father said, "The hell with her. She's a damn bank clerk. She doesn't make enough to pay whatever. You're as good as any of these people." But I felt that way ever since. Anyway, the streets and the city governments couldn't keep up during the dam building days at Fort Pierre and certainly Yankton. They did with the utilities, and roads, and streets. We had an awful lot of muddy streets in Fort Pierre and Pierre in the 1950s and 60s. Pierre was not a pretty town during the dam building days. It was pretty awful. Yet, it had a good heart. So that's why I'm still here on it all. So, let's see, I was going to ask you, like usual, I forgot my notes.
While Ken's going through his notes, I just add, Pickstown did not allow alcohol.
Yeah.
All the adjoining towns, Lake Andes, Wagner, down in Nebraska, everybody went down there to the bars to drink.
Yeah.
Alcohol was not permissible.
And that's a
in Pickstown.
So what a great
Because the
model
core
town.
ran it, right?
What a
Yes.
great model town Pickstown was. You know, there were plans afoot when construction started on the Wahi Dam to build such a town north of Fort Pierre, to be called, I think, a Wahi City. Of course, the local officials, who was that idea? It might have been just as nice as Pickstown. Who knows? Been great, because Pickstown was sure no good. But I love the old place. I've been dashing here at Fort Pierre. It's a wonderful place to live. Anyway, I had, like I said, Bill's covered a lot of what I was going to say, and I thank him for that. Now I can sit down because it's not easy any longer for me to stand up. So I'm going to simply close. The dam workers came from South Dakota, thousands of them. Many stayed, families thrived. It contributed to the economy and the growth of the state. They loved South Dakota just as much as anybody else. And God bless them all. God bless anybody that worked that hard on those dams. It's terribly hard and dangerous work. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Nobody got anything to say.
Okay,
They were speechless, I'm sure.
well, so now we'll open it up. Is there anybody who would like to ask a question of Bill and Ken?
Bill,
Yes,
2 questions. Are you there, Bill?
yep, yes, I'm here.
Oh, you got.
Yes.
Yes, I think you need to
Oh,
speak.
okay. Do I need to be over here? Work.
Yeah, come to the microphone. 2 questions, Bill.
Yes, here we are.
The first one, what is the population of Pickstown now? I live in Madison, Wisconsin, but I was at the dedication, the opening ceremony, and in 1946 on July 30th, I used to live in Salem, and I have, I want to know somebody at the Pickstown Museum, do they have one of these programs and so forth? I have several of them. And that one, as well as the actually the printed program, and then the August article from Life magazine on August 22nd of 1955, the U.S. Masters the Big Muddy. Would the Pickstown Museum be interested in those items?
Oh, certainly. Anything that anybody has in history. We do have a copy of that ceremony, but we can certainly, we've expanded our museum out. We originally had about 1,200 square feet. We've almost doubled that recently, and we're adding new exhibits. So anything that people can add to our museum, I would gladly receive. It can be mailed to my address, as well as anybody that's interested in having the book mailed to them. It's Bill Lampman, the Pickstown Fort Randall Museum, P.O. Box 207, Pickstown, South Dakota 57367.
And Mr.
Good.
Shields, I will send that, I will email that to you. And others. So,
Well, will you email the information then of the museum address?
yes, yeah, I will send that
Excuse
to
me,
you.
Dorinda, can I address a brief?
Who are you
comment?
gonna send it to?
Yes.
Who are you gonna send it to?
I'm, I believe you're John Shield.
Yes, could you
Yes,
just post,
yes.
or,
I'm sorry.
well, for other people, Dorinda, for other people who might be interested, can you just post it on the South Dakota State Historical Society website?
We'll get that to you some, yeah, we'll get it to you. And Mr.
Thanks.
Stewart wants to talk to you too.
I don't know if you remember me, but Mr. Shield, I worked with Edith George when I was a young
Well,
man.
who's talking now?
Ken Stewart, the historian. I worked with Edith George, of course, and I know
Yeah.
that you were a good friend of her and Bill.
Yeah, are you in the audience there? That's a
Yeah,
confusing.
yeah.
Okay, well, I knew Edith and Bill George very, very wonderfully, been at their home many times, and
I'm
have,
glad to see you're still with us.
what?
I'm glad to see you're still with us.
Yeah, well,
Anyway, I will be getting information on how to get the book too, so people can contact me. And we do have it. I happen to have a copy right here, and we do sell it in our store. So,
I brought my check.
and we have a Matthew Reitzel from our archives made a display of photos of the building of Fort Randall Dam that I'd encourage people to go over and look at.
well, Dorinda, should we send these things that I mentioned to Bill? Should we send them to the Pickstown Museum, or should we send them to the archives, South Dakota State Historical Archive?
Well, I'll ask Matthew and I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Okay, what other questions would people like to ask?
I have a question about the chapel. Last time I was there was 50 years ago, and there was no roof on it.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the old fort,
Or,
Yes,
the old Christ Church.
okay.
yes.
They
Have they
spent
restored it?
400,000 to put a roof over it and try and restore all the walls. It was made out of clay or soapstone, chalkstone. So it kind of fell in after they recoated the walls. I think they've recoated them the last year or so, and everything is. That church is very unique. We have a cop or one of the pew markers out there. One thing I failed to mention, I said something about how Pickstown got its name. Lieutenant General Pick was in the Army in World War I, served over in France. World War II, over in Burma, India. He was instrumental in building the Burma Road up into China, through the jungles. From World War II, he came to Pickstown with the intent on building 5 dams on the Missouri, which he carried out. He was involved in 12 dams in the United States. So we're very fortunate that we have somebody of his knowledge to come in and construct these dams in South Dakota.
And what
I
was
think
his
he
name?
grew up in Mississippi or somewhere down south.
What was his full name again?
Pick.
I don't.
You caught me. I know him as Lieutenant General Pick. But, yeah. But anyway, yeah. he was-
Lewis Pick.
Lewis Pick, thank you. I did.
Well,
Saved me.
Well, you should
Anyway,
have-
I failed to mention that, and, yeah, otherwise, Pickstown or these dams on the Missouri wouldn't be there.
That old chapel used to have a tree growing out of
Yeah.
That chapel had a lot of experience, tornadoes, windstorms, that thing really, but we have a replica of it in the museum. Our museum really has a lot of interesting.
The museum
items.
here has one of those pews from the chapel. They're made out of black walnut. Oh.
We have the pew markers, and I think I've just found the bell that serviced at old Fort Randall. It's in a museum down in Nebraska. It was casted in St. Louis, Missouri. It's got Washington's picture on it, and hopefully I can get it in our museum. So anybody that has facts, artifacts that they want to bring into the museum, if we don't have room to display it, I like to change periodically different things just to draw interest. So we set it, we got plenty of storage area. Our building that we're in is the old shopping center building, 13,000 square feet, and we're only using about, we do have a ballroom in there that occasionally, it's used for town board meetings, and we have other events there too. Up until 3 years ago, we were renting it out for dances or for different things going on, weddings. People like to come there for weddings. The old chapel, the chapel in Pickstown is very unique. And then we have the the rainbow room that we now are starting to rent it out again.
So are the streets still there, or have they torn those down too?
Streets, everything's there exactly the way it was. There's a picture of it, Google Earth, 2019. There's the town right there in the upper right.
You can visualize the town because the
Upper
foundation
right.
is still there, the building,
Yeah.
And,
Very,
It was great.
it was laid out to no other town. There was no other town that had the structure, the foundation that this town has. Everything was new. Everything was, and the Corps of Engineers did not mess around. When they built.
Yeah, I did want to make a comment before I lose my fading memory. regarding the alternative to the Missouri River dams. Now, Will Robinson and his good friend Bob Hibble, the publisher of the Capital Journal, had a concept in the 1920s that we should dam the Missouri River, but we should dam it so that we could have navigation. Small coffer dams with a passageway so that steamboats or riverboats could come upriver, taking grain maybe down to St. Louis, bringing up whatever machinery, etc., just like it was being done on the Mississippi. For whatever reasons, costs probably were the considerations. Maybe there wasn't enough revenue. They put out lots of brochures on the subject, but nothing ever came to be. These two gentlemen were really pioneers in the development of the Missouri River, for good or for bad. So that's.
What other questions would people
Yeah.
like?
I'd like to make some comments. My name's Guy Rhodes. I'm a old-time resident of Pickstown. I graduated from Pickstown High School in 1955. My dad and my father-in-law both worked for the Corps of Engineers. I'd just like to add some, Bill covered a lot of details. I'd just like to add some personal comments to this. The first thing I'd like to mention is, for those of you who can see who's on the screen, there's a guy by the name of W. Fisk. That's Warren Fisk. Can you see him? Yeah,
Yes.
if you can see him. Anyway, Warren's picture is up there. I got it in front of me. When Pickstown first started, there were only single men there, and in January of 1948, it was suitable for family living. And the first family to move in was the Farrell family, Bob and Pearl Farrell, with their 4 boys. Quickly after that, there were several families that followed. Warren Fisk's family was one of those. Warren's father was a surveyor for the Corps. Warren followed in his footsteps and had to set up a survey business. He went to School of Mines and got into the surveying field. But anyway, Warren moved into Pickstown probably in late January or February or March of 1948. So Warren was one of the first, he was one of the early handful of residents that moved into Pickstown. There's Warren, if you can see him. He lives out in Rapid City now. I'd also like to comment on some other of the comments that were made. The town of Pickstown never had any serious alcohol problems. It was a dry town for the first few years. General Pick would not allow any alcohol in the town. And then eventually, and I don't know exactly what year, it might have been 1950, 51, or 52, there was a beer parlor set up, but General Pick and George Evans, who was the area engineer in charge of the construction, did not allow any alcohol in early time. So I left Pickstown in 1955, but I never witnessed any sort of serious alcohol problems in the town. I can't say the same for Lake Andes. There were several bars there. A lot of people went into Lake Andes. The other thing I'd comment on, and I worked, it was a great place as a kid. When you were old enough, about 16, you could work on the dam, worked in the dam, and I worked on the dam in summers. I worked for the Pittsburgh Des Moines Steel Company. That was a company that built the steel penstocks that went through the concrete tunnels carrying the water from the intake towers to the powerhouse. So I spent a lot of time down there in pounding around in those tunnels. I also worked at Gavin's Point during my summer years at college. So I have a lot of information on the construction of the dam, and the book that Bill's referred to has a tremendous amount of information on how that dam was constructed, the value of contracts that were let, all the major contractors. Incidentally, there was a comment made about contractors. There were probably about a dozen major contractors, Western Electric, Donovan, Lovin and Boyle, Johnson, Winston, and so on. But in total, counting all the contractors and subcontractors, there were probably over 1,000. So there were a lot of contractors that came in and out. And the town population, the maximum recorded population for the town was 3,250 in 1950. But the town fluctuated rapidly with the construction cycle. When the winter months came, construction workers left and then would come back in the spring. So if you were in school as a kid, you had to make friends fast because they disappeared almost overnight. So anyway, I just wanted to make those, I had a few personal comments, and I'd be glad to comment if there are any questions.
Mr. Rhodes, like one of the early who grew up there was Tom Brokaw.
Yeah.
Did you want to make a few comments about his growing up years, or if you knew him?
Say, repeat that question. What about Brokaw?
Did you know him, or?
Oh, yeah. Tom Brokaw spent his formative years in Pickstown. He came in January of 1948. He was in the second grade, and he left in the summer of 1955. His dad worked for the Corps of Engineers. Actually, his dad and my dad both worked for my wife's dad, who was the powerhouse superintendent. And then they both worked for him later at Gavin's Point. But yes, I've known Tom and his family for 65 years or more. I communicate fairly regularly with him, probably several times a month.
Are there any like blackmailing secrets we should know about?
Well, I will tell you this. I did embarrass myself when we dedicated the museum in 2014. I was Brokaw was our keynote speaker along, and then we had Colonel Cross from the Omaha Corps of Engineers District, and we had the Lieutenant Governor at that time, Matt Michaels, who were also speakers. But I was trying to get a crowd, press crowd, to our museum dedication, and I wasn't having much luck. I'd contacted the newspapers. And about a day before, I got a call from a young lady at NBC News, and she said, Mr. Brokaw asked me to contact you to see if there's any way we could help with the dedication. And I said, well, you know, you can. I said, I've had much luck getting attention. And so I gave her the name of newspapers and so on. All heck broke loose. We had all the major newspapers there. The TV station in Sioux Falls sent a TV crew. They filmed it. It was we were on it was the next morning, Saturday. It was on the Today Show, and on and on and on. So anyway, this news reporter from the TV station in Sioux Falls was interviewing me, and she asked the same question that you asked. Did I know Tom Brokaw, and what was it like? What was he like? Well, he was 3 years behind me in school. And so I proceeded to talk to him about him a little bit. And I said, well, quite frankly, he was younger and he was kind of a pest because he was always in the way. She put that on TV. And I got a message from Brokaw and he said, you know, he said, I think you're right.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else who would like to comment, or is there anyone else who would like to comment or ask a question?
Is there some kind of concert coming on Pickstown in the near future?
Conflict?
Concert,
Oh, concert?
music concert.
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay, well, somebody
We
told me
just had
so.
Molly B. Polka at the casino. That was 2 weeks ago.
Virginia, we can take our act on the road.
You know, somebody would want to come, we actually have a ballroom in Pickstown. And I'm trying to get people to come and perform if the town will allow us.
What year did this school close?
In 1968, the last graduating class went through the high school. The grade school continued until 1976. Then everything transferred to Lake Andes, and the school was torn down. What a loss, what a loss.
Yeah.
Say, I have a question for the museum. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so my question is the museum at all involved with the tribe? You know, there were, in terms of your displays or your information, I'm familiar, I guess, with the community of White Swan, and there were some other native settlements along the river that got flooded, of course, by the lake. But in terms of the history of the area, there was population there, you know, of the indigenous population before the fort and the white people. And there was also, I think there was a fur trade post, Papanews post, something like that. There was, or Trudeau's. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any information in
That
your
was
museum?
the first established building in South Dakota, the Dakota Territory, 1794. And a lot of fur traders, Pierre Dorian, who was a guide with Lewis and Clark, was in the area. We are trying to get the fort. Sitting Bull was held captive there for 20 months. While he was at Fort Randall, old Fort Randall, he traveled with Buffalo Bill Cody. He couldn't read or write, but he signed a card with his signature and sold that. He became great friends with Annie Oakley, and he actually called her his daughter or granddaughter. He was captured after the defeat of Little Bighorn, and the clan moved up into Canada. And he came back down into the States and was captured at Fort Yates. And from Fort Yates, he was transferred to Fort Randall, old Fort Randall. He didn't want to come to Fort Randall. He tried everything to do to stop him. But once he got to Fort Randall, he was happy. Spent 20 months there at Fort Randall.
I'd like to comment on your question about the Native Americans. They probably suffered the biggest hardship when the dam was put in, and Pickstown, the Corps of Engineers, had a person in charge of real estate acquiring the land, and Bill mentioned the large quantity of land that had to be procured, and so it was purchased from a handful of farmers in the area. One was Dvorak, and incidentally, the Dvorak farm still sits on the north edge of Pickstown. I don't know whether Bill has a picture there, but we have a picture of the Dvorak farm, and you can see the acreage above it where the town was built. But anyway, the point is, there was a lot of complaining on the purchase of land because of delays from the time the offer was made until it was consummated. And real estate apparently was appreciating a lot. And a lot of the farmers felt that they had not been treated properly. But that aside, I think the early Native Americans probably suffered the biggest hardship when the dam came in and was built. When the town was up for sale, they wanted that town in the worst way, actually made the case that it belonged to them based on some sort of early treaty. And Bill kind of covered this, but Senator Abner stepped in and kind of blocked all that and got Reagan to sign some paperwork that transferred it to the local residents. But I think the Native Americans suffered the most.
Thank you again for those comments. Any other questions or comments?
So my brother-in-law just texted me that the Texas Howlers are gonna be at Pickstown this Saturday night.
The Texas Howlers,
Yes, that's what he said.
Saturday night.
This Saturday.
Rosemary, we got an answer.
Where are they playing it?
Well, how many places in Pickstown?
It's gotta be
Main
those
Come and
Street.
see.
The town board must be holding out on it, because they never.
Maybe you're out of town, it's at your place.
I will check that out first thing I get home.
So we might.
Hi, good evening. I've got a couple of comments for you. I'm listening in from Washington, D.C. My name's Alan Brose, but I grew up in Tripp, South Dakota, just a little bit northeast of Pickstown. And what I remember about that as a small kid was that I think construction was a 7-day-a-week operation, because we used to take a trip on Sunday after church and drive over and watch the dam being built. Also then in 1962, I started high school in Tripp and I played football, and our athletic conference was the Fort Randall Athletic Conference. And we played Pickstown, Dante, Ravinia, Geddes, all those towns over there. So I have that memory of being in Pickstown, being in the school. And finally, then in my senior year in high school, I was a part of the program for the District 7 Legionnaires Convention that was held in the school at Pickstown. So again, I was in the school building there. I have one question about your museum. First of all, I think it's so fabulous that you're preserving all this local history. I'm a great history buff myself, and I really think this is valuable. And I'm wondering, how expansive is your coverage? For example, I know the town of Wheeler disappeared with the building of the dam. Do you have any information about Wheeler?
We do have some information on Wheeler. We actually have probably 70 some binders of every news article, every story that generated from Pickstown area. So certainly we do have that bridge at Wheeler was flooded up to Chamberlain.
Right.
It's now recited at Chamberlain.
Yeah.
So, and the town of Wheeler was very notable. And yes, we do have some.
Yeah.
We have some vintage pictures of the bridge being dismantled and moved on barges up to the Chamberlain area. So there is some information. Yeah. Incidentally, on your comment about 7 days a week, you're absolutely right. The crowds on weekends sometimes would be 5,000 or 6,000 people that would come into Pickstown to watch dam construction. But it was 7 days a week, and it was 3 shifts. Actually, the night work was done with big spotlights. The dam was lit up, and if you went and looked from the observation point in the evening, you could see a lot of the construction just due to the lighting. Yes, you're absolutely right. It actually never stopped. The only time it slowed down was in the fall when it got cold. And then there were some areas that were enclosed where they could continue to work through the winter. But the Western construction out of Sioux City, Iowa had 4 of the 5 major earth moving contracts. The last one went to Peter Kiewit. But Western, of course, in the winter wasn't able to move dirt, but Western construction moved most of the dirt, and there was huge amount of dirt that was moved. We have in the museum over 1,000 pictures that the Corps of Engineers gave me on file. My museum file is 75 gigabytes of pictures and all sorts of data. So we've done a terrific job of collecting information. And I guess I ought to make this comment. We are so, I was one of the founders of that museum, but I live now remotely. I get back there only once in a while. We are so fortunate. We are so fortunate to have Bill Lampman in Pickstown. If you didn't know it, you would think he was a native, that he had grown up there. He has picked up everything he can to promote the museum and promote the town of Pickstown. He does an absolutely fabulous job for the town.
That's high praise.
Well, Spencer, Nebraska is a suburb.
You know, growing up there, Dad went up to the river every weekend.
Sure.
Spent many trips up to Fort Randall, fishing, never drove through the town. Never saw the town until I met Roseberry in 2002. So from 2002.
Incidentally, I don't know whether Bill mentioned it or he's got something up there, but we set up a website on the museum, and it's called pickstownmuseum.com. And if you go on that site, it's got several drop downs. It's got a lot of pictures. It's got about a dozen videos. There is a great video that Tom Brokaw made. He brought an NBC crew out, and he made a video it's about 15 minutes as a sort of an intro for the museum. And so if you want to learn more about Pickstown, just visit the site pickstownmuseum.com.
I think we have time for one more comment or question. Anybody with a question or comment?
I'll comment on the later years. I grew up in Pickstown, and what I remember, and it's kind of interesting, towards the end of that government-owned town era, you had to work for the government to live there.
Absolutely.
Or the state. We had teachers, highway patrolmen, game warden lived there, but predominantly it was Corps engineers, employees that lived there. And that group of people that worked for the Corps then, that was the Army Corps engineers, they hired all the veterans. And just about everybody I knew up and down the road, they were all World War II veterans. And all those people are gone now. But yeah, they were all veterans. And to live in a town that was full of veterans like that.
These people that lived there
Very interesting.
had everything done by the Corps, the yard works, everything in the house, changing light bulbs even. They virtually, all they had to do was work their shifts, day and night, 24 hours. And
we mowed
everything
the
else
yards.
was provided.
We mowed the yards and that, but they had maintenance crew for the houses and plumbers and electricians and town management, and then you had the powerhouse crew, and And so there was different groups, but all those people were, just about all of them were, that I remember knew of were veterans of World War II specifically. And there was a couple of Vietnam veterans there, but yeah, it was unique that you're in a veteran town like that. And these people came from all over, you know, there wasn't a lot of local, they came there to work.
Our book,
You
like I
hit,
said, has everything in it. It's a must-have. I can't overemphasize how it explains everything that happened, and it's a miracle on the Missouri. And I say it's a mystery on the Missouri, just why it went from such a big model town, everything modern, new, to nothing, virtually nothing. So
that, I'd like to comment on that veteran remark. I guess you had to live there to really understand it, but as Bill mentioned, it started in 46, 47, and the town was filled with veterans. There was a priority on hiring veterans, but the town was filled with people that had just come out of the war, had lived through the Depression, were looking for a good home, solid home with a decent pay, and they had a terrific work ethic. And it was an amazing place to live because everyone was willing to help everybody else. And Warren would understand this, but you had to live through it. I can't frame it with words that will do it justice, but that town was something like nothing else in South Dakota. It also had, while it had a very high amount of professional people. There were a lot of engineers, a lot of highly skilled construction workers, and the town had a population that was like nothing else in South Dakota and probably very few places in the country.
I got a question. Is this museum at Pickstown, is that open to this day, every day?
you know, on the website, I have my home phone set up for Pickstown Museum. You can call there and leave your name and telephone number, and we'll open that museum for anybody that wants to come through and see it. I'm retired, I'm there most of the time, but it's listed, and I need to get some more information out, but the number's on the pickstownmuseum.com website.
That'd be pretty hard to keep that open all day long, every day.
Yeah, well, you know, it's really frustrating. I get more people, just like I opened it up for the 4th of July. I had 15 people come in. Not one was the town people. It's very frustrating. Right now, I sent out a notice in the utility bill. Everybody owns towns or owns a house here in this town should own this book. No, it's history.
Yeah.
So it just went out a couple days ago. So I'm waiting for the orders to come in.
So, do people rent these houses or own these houses, or you work there, so you just got a house, or what? And then
Back in that day, if you worked for the Corps,
you just, there's a
you had
house where you
living
go
quarters
move in.
there. Yes. And they paid, I don't know, 10%. Guy would probably know what the very
What's the
little-
question?
What was the cost for housing in Pickstown back in the working days?
Okay, I can tell you, I can give you a benchmark. There was some comment about housing, and Ken talked about the cabins, the little white cabins and so on, but there were about 100 plus of those. And then there was a huge trailer court or two. And then there were duplexes. And there were white duplexes, and then there was the standard brown duplex, 2-bedroom. My family lived in a 2-bedroom duplex, and it cost $54 a month for rent from the Corps. Then in addition to the duplexes up around Missouri Drive, we called it the Circle in those days. And it was where some of the higher level Corps of Engineers people lived. They built permanent houses, and those still stand, and they've added more since the town has been developed in later years. But it was $54 for a 2-bedroom duplex. And incidentally, that duplex was the finest house that our family ever had. And if you watch Tom Brokaw's video on Pickstown.com, he talks about it. In fact, shows the duplex they lived in, and he made the same remark. There was nothing wrong with those duplexes. They were warm and cozy in the winter. I guess we didn't have air conditioning or TV, so but it was the finest house that my family had ever lived in.
That website has about 4 hours of material, videos, building the dam, everything that you want to know about the dam. But if you go on the website, please come to our museum also.
Well, I think we'll all be making a road trip to Pickstown Saturday night.
I just want to make one thing. I'm just a 94-year-old alkaline old buzzard from Lampman River, but I just wondered if I could get one of my family or my good friend Frank here to take me down there to see that museum. Would we drive clear down there for nothing?
You call and give me a time. Do you want to be there? I'll meet you.
There's a phone number on here.
There you go.
Is that it? Okay.
That's it.
We'll get you one of those. I'm holding on to this one.
I'll get you some more of those, for those that don't have.
Well, I didn't go over there yet.
Well, again, thank you for attending. We do have the book for sale. I'd encourage you to look at the photographs over there. Our next program will be on a Wednesday night, August 18th. We're having it on a Wednesday because that's when the author can be here. Pamela Novak will be here, and the book is Never Let Go, and it's about the Dakota uprising of 1862, and it follows the lives of 5 women. Very well researched. We do have are going to be carrying the book in our bookstore. Have to put in a shameless plug there for the bookstore. And we will be offering it in person here and via Zoom too. So everybody will have a chance to go. Anyway, thank you. And I think I'm glad you all attended such a wonderful program. And I hope you participate in future programs.